What if I told you? One spin, one hand, one roll of the dice could change your life forever? Some walk away with nothing, others walk away millionaires. But the secret isn't just luck. It's knowing when to play and when to walk away. It was a hot summer afternoon, the kind of day when even the birds seemed too tired to sing. The sun blazed mercilessly over the long stretch of country road, the asphalt shimmering like fire. Along that empty road, a sleek black luxury car stood still on the side. One tire completely flat. Inside the car sat Mr. Anderson, a well-dressed businessman with neatly combed hair and an expensive suit that was now clinging to his skin with sweat. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, annoyed and restless. Mr. Anderson was a millionaire, well known across the city for his massive real estate empire. He owned hotels, office towers, and more cars than he could count. But at this moment, none of that mattered. All his wealth, his power, and his status couldn't help him fix a simple flat tire. The road was deserted. No repair shops anywhere nearby? To make matters worse, when he reached for his phone, the screen showed zero signal. He sighed, leaned back in the seat, and muttered under his breath, "Of all days, why today?" Just when Mr. Anderson thought the day couldn't get any worse, he noticed movement in the distance. A small figure was walking down the road, carrying a faded backpack slung over one shoulder. As the figure got closer, Mr. Anderson saw that it was a young boy, maybe 12 or 13 years old. His clothes were simple and worn, his shoes covered in dust from walking. But what stood out most were his eyes, bright, focused, full of determination. The boy stopped beside the car and looked up. "Sir, do you need help?" he asked politely, his voice calm and steady. Mr. Anderson raised an eyebrow and almost laughed. "Help? You? Son, this is a complicated car. I don't think you can fix it." But the boy didn't argue. He just gave a small smile and replied, "I've fixed my mom's old car before. I can try." There was something about the boy's confidence that made Mr. Anderson hesitate. Finally, with a shrug, he stepped out of the car and said, "Fine, let's see what you can do." The boy set his backpack down, pulled out a small rusty wrench, and went straight to work. His hands moved quickly and surely, loosening the bolts with ease. He lifted the jack into place, raised the car, and rolled the spare tire over. Mr. Anderson stood there, arms crossed, watching closely. At first he expected the boy to struggle, maybe even give up. But to his surprise, the boy worked. With skill and determination, as if he had done it 100 times before. In less than 20 minutes, the job was done. The new tire was secure, the tools were put back in place, and the boy stepped back, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "All set, sir," he said with a grin. Mr. Anderson stared at him in disbelief. "Where did you learn all that?" My Mom," the boy replied proudly. "She works 2 jobs, but when our old car breaks down, I help her fix it. She always says, 'Don't give up until the problem is solved.'" For a moment, Mr. Anderson was silent. The boy reminded him of something he hadn't felt in years. Humility. Mr. Anderson reached into his pocket, pulled out his leather wallet, and took out a $100 bill. "Here," he said, handing it over. "You earned this." But the boy shook his head and stepped back. "No, sir." "I don't want money," Mr. Anderson frowned. "What do you mean you don't want money?" "Everybody wants money." The boy looked him straight in the eyes and replied softly, "My mom says helping people is more important than getting paid. Just promise me that when you see someone else in need, you'll remember me and help them too." The words struck Mr. Anderson like lightning. For the first time in years, he felt speechless. No one had ever refused his money before, especially not a poor boy, who clearly could have used it. As the boy picked up his backpack and began to walk away, Mr. Anderson suddenly called after him, "Wait, what's your name?" "Michael," the boy answered with a smile. "Michael," Mr. Anderson repeated quietly as if trying to memorize it. He watched the boy disappear down the long dusty road, his small frame carrying a lesson far greater than any business deal. That night, when Mr. Anderson returned to his mansion, he couldn't shake the thought of the boy. Michael had reminded him of something he had long forgotten: kindness, humility, and the simple power of helping others without expecting anything in return. For the first time in years, The millionaire sat quietly, reflecting on his life. And he realized that sometimes the richest people aren't the ones with the most money, but the ones with the biggest hearts. The boy set his backpack down and got to work. His hands moved quickly, loosening bolts, lifting the jack, and replacing the flat tire with the spare. Mr. Anderson watched in shock, unable to believe how confidently the boy handled the tools. "Where did you learn all this?" he finally asked. "My mom," the boy said proudly. "She works 2 jobs, and sometimes I help her with little things. She always says we can solve problems if we don't give up." Within 20 minutes, the car was ready to drive again. Mr. Anderson was amazed. He had expected the boy to struggle, maybe even make things worse, but instead, the task was done better than most mechanics would have managed. The millionaire reached into his wallet, pulled out a few bills, and said, "Here, take this for your help?" But the boy shook his head. "No, sir. I don't want money. Just promise me one thing: when you see someone who needs help, you'll remember today." For a moment, Mr. Anderson was speechless. No one had ever refused his money before. He was a man used to writing checks and making problems go away. He believed everyone had a price, but this boy's refusal left him unsettled. "Are you sure?" he asked again, holding out the bills. The boy gave a small smile and nodded. "Yes, sir. Money comes and goes, but kindness lasts longer. My mom says when you help someone, you plant a seed, and that seed grows." Mr. Anderson slowly lowered his wallet, watching the boy carefully. There was no greed in his eyes, no hidden agenda. He was simply genuine. For a man who spent most of his life surrounded by people who wanted favors, contracts, or handouts, this felt almost unreal. "What's your name, son?" he asked. "Michael," the boy replied softly. "And where are you headed?" "Home," Michael answered. "It's about a mile from here." Mr. Anderson glanced at the boy's worn shoes and dusty clothes. "Get in, I'll give you a ride." Michael hesitated for a moment, then climbed into the car. The leather seats were soft, and the air conditioning cooled his sweaty face. For a boy used to walking everywhere, the luxury felt almost magical. As they drove, Mr. Anderson asked about his family. Michael was quiet at first, but then he spoke. "It's just me, my mom, and my little sister. My dad passed away 2 years ago. Mom works all the time, but sometimes it's still hard. That's why I try to help when I can." Mr. Anderson felt a sting in his chest. He glanced at Michael, who was staring out the window, lost in thought. The boy's honesty, his refusal to take money, his sense of responsibility, it was unlike anything Mr. Anderson usually saw in the world around him. When they pulled up in front of Michael's house, Mr. Anderson's heart grew heavier. The small wooden home looked tired, with peeling paint, broken steps, and a sagging fence. But despite its condition, it felt alive. A little girl ran out barefoot, shouting her brother's name, and hugged him tightly. Their mother soon appeared, her face tired but warm, wiping her hands on her apron. "Thank you for bringing my son home," she said kindly, unaware of who the man in the expensive suit really was. Mr. Anderson nodded, unable to find words. He watched as the boy handed his sister a small snack from his backpack, sharing without hesitation. That night, after Mr. Anderson returned to his mansion, he couldn't sleep. He sat in his enormous living room, surrounded by luxury, yet all he could think about was Michael. A boy who had nothing, yet refused money. A boy who lived in hardship, yet spoke of kindness. The millionaire realized that for years he had been measuring life the wrong way. He thought success was about bank accounts, skyscrapers, and expensive cars. But that little boy had shown him that true wealth was in the heart. The next morning, Mr. Anderson made a decision. He returned to Michael's home, not as a rich businessman trying to flaunt his money, but as a man who had been touched by kindness. He spoke with Michael's mother, explaining how her son had helped him in a way no amount of money could repay. At first, she was reluctant to accept anything. She didn't want charity, but Mr. Anderson insisted. He offered to cover Michael's education, ensuring the boy would never have to worry about school expenses again. He also promised to help repair their home and even set up a small savings fund for the family. Tears filled the mother's eyes, and Michael stood silently, overwhelmed. The boy who had refused money suddenly realized that sometimes kindness does come back, just in unexpected ways. Years later, Michael would remember that summer day not as the time he fixed a stranger's flat tire, but as the moment his life changed forever, and Mr. Anderson would never forget the boy who reminded him that the richest person in the world isn't the one with the most money, it's the one with the biggest heart. As the boy started to leave, Mr. Anderson stopped him. "Wait, what's your name?" "Michael," the boy replied softly. "And where are you going?" "Home," Michael answered. "It's about a mile from here." Mr. Anderson looked at the long, dusty road and the boy's worn-out shoes. Without thinking, he said, "Get in, I'll give you a ride." Michael hesitated at first, but eventually climbed into the car. The leather seats were soft, and the cool air from the air conditioner brushed against his face. He sat quietly, his backpack on his lap, staring out the window as if his thoughts were far away. Mr. Anderson stole glances at him. The boy seemed too serious for his age, as though he carried a burden far heavier than any child should. Curious, he finally asked, "So, Michael, tell me about your family." Michael shifted uncomfortably, then answered in a low voice, "It's just me. My mom and my little sister. My dad passed away 2 years ago. Mom works a lot, sometimes 2 jobs, just so we can pay the bills. But even then, it's still hard. Some nights we don't even have enough for food." The car grew silent. Mr. Anderson's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Those words hit him harder than he expected. He had spent his life surrounded by luxury gourmet meals, expensive suits, private jets. And here was a boy who had just refused money. Even though he clearly needed it, they drove the rest of the way in silence until finally Michael pointed. "That's our house, sir." When Mr. Anderson pulled up, he was stunned. The small wooden home was old and tired, its paint peeling, the fence broken and leaning to the side. The roof sagged slightly and the front steps were cracked. It looked as though it hadn't seen repairs in years. Before he could say anything, the front door swung open. A little girl with messy hair and no shoes came running out. "Michael!" she shouted, throwing her arms around him. He hugged her tightly, pulling a small snack from his backpack and placing it in her hand. Their mother stepped out next, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked exhausted, with shadows under her eyes, but when she saw Michael, her face softened into a tired smile. She walked toward the car and nodded politely. "Thank you for bringing my son home," she said kindly, her voice gentle but worn. She had no idea who the man standing before her was, no idea that he was one of the wealthiest men in the city. To her, he was simply a stranger who had given her son a ride. Mr. Anderson tried to smile back, but his heart was heavy. He wanted to say something, to offer help, but the words caught in his throat. He wasn't used to moments like this, moments that reminded him of struggles he had long forgotten. As he drove away, he couldn't stop thinking about them. The image of Michael's dusty shoes, the broken fence, the little sister running barefoot across the yard, it all lingered in his mind that night in his grand mansion filled with polished floors, chandeliers, and expensive art. Mr. Anderson sat alone at his dining table. A feast was laid out before him, dishes prepared by his chef, yet he couldn't bring himself to eat. His thoughts kept drifting back to Michael. Here was a boy who had nothing yet gave everything he could. A boy who had refused money but offered a lesson instead. Mr. Anderson realized how different their lives were, and yet how much he had learned from him in just a few short hours. For years, he had measured success in numbers, dollars, deals, and properties. But Michael had shown him something else. That true wealth wasn't in what you owned, but in the kind of heart you carried. The next morning, Mr. Anderson made a decision. He drove back down that same country road until he reached Michael's home. The boy and his sister were sitting on the porch, sharing a piece of bread. Their mother was hanging clothes on a line nearby. When she saw the luxury car pull up again, she looked surprised. Mr. Anderson stepped out, walked up to her, and said, "I owe your son more than I can ever repay. He helped me in a way money never could. And I'd like to help your family if you'll allow me." At first, she shook her head. "I appreciate it, sir, but we don't take charity. We work hard for what we have." Mr. Anderson smiled gently. This isn't charity. Think of it as me honoring the kindness your son showed me. He planted a seed, and I want to see it grow." With that, he explained his plan. He would cover Michael's school expenses, repair their home, and set up a small fund to make sure. They never had to worry about food again. Tears welled up in the mother's eyes, and Michael stood silently, overwhelmed. He didn't know what to say, and in that moment, Mr. Anderson realized that his flat tire had not been bad luck at all. It had been fate that led him to a boy who reminded him of the true meaning of wealth, kindness, and humanity. That night, Mr. Anderson couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his giant bed, staring at the ceiling as memories filled his mind. He kept replaying the moment when Michael refused his money. The boy's honesty and selflessness reminded him of a time long ago when he too had been poor, struggling to survive before becoming wealthy. As a child, Mr. Anderson had lived in a small house not so different from Michael's. His father had worked long hours in a factory, and his mother had taken whatever small jobs she could find, just to put food on the table. He remembered the holes in his shoes, the nights they ate only bread, and the humiliation of wearing second-hand clothes to school. He had promised himself that one day he would never be poor again, and he had kept that promise. But in chasing wealth, he had forgotten the struggles that shaped him. Michael's words had awakened something deep within him. The next morning, Mr. Anderson made a decision. He dressed not in his sharp business suit, but in something simple. This wasn't a business deal. This was something personal. He got into his car and drove back to Michael's house, determined to do more than just thank him. When he pulled up, Michael and his little sister were sitting on the porch steps, sharing a small sandwich between them. Their mother was hanging laundry on a line, her movements slow, her face tired but focused. She looked surprised when the same luxury car rolled up again. Mr. Anderson stepped out, his presence towering in the shabby yard. Michael ran to greet him, smiling nervously. His mother approached more cautiously, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sir, you came back?" she asked politely, though her tone carried a hint of confusion. Mr. Anderson nodded and gestured toward the porch. "May I sit down with you for a moment?" They all gathered together, the expensive suit against worn wood and faded clothes. Worlds apart yet connected by one act of kindness, Mr. Anderson took a deep breath before speaking. "Your son helped me yesterday in a way I will never forget," he said sincerely. "He reminded me of values I had almost lost: honesty, humility, and kindness, and I want to help your family in return." At first, Michael's mother shook her head. "We appreciate your kindness, sir, but we don't take charity. We work hard for what we have." "Michael didn't help you for a reward. I know," Mr. Anderson replied gently. "And that's exactly why I want to do this. This isn't charity, it's me honoring the gift your son gave me. He planted a seed in me, and now I want to make sure it grows." He explained his plan. He would arrange for a full scholarship for Michael, covering all his school expenses until college. No more worrying about books, uniforms, or fees. He would also pay to repair their home, fix the roof, paint the walls, replace the broken fence. And he would open a small savings account for the family, something that would give them security in times of need. Michael's mother pressed her hand to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Sir, this is too much. We can't accept something like this." "You can," Mr. Anderson said with a warm smile, "because you don't owe me anything. But sometimes the best way to honor kindness is to pass it forward. Your son already changed my life. Now let me help change his." Michael stood silently, overwhelmed. He had never imagined that helping with a flat tire could lead to something like this. His little sister clung to his side, her wide eyes staring at the stranger who suddenly felt like a guardian angel. Finally, Michael's mother broke down, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Thank you." Mr. Anderson reached out, placing his hand gently over hers. "No, thank you. You've raised a boy with a heart of gold. The world needs more people like him." For the rest of the day, they spoke about plans, school, repairs, and the future. And as the sun dipped low behind the trees, Mr. Anderson left their home, but this time he carried something far more valuable than business contracts or profits. He carried peace. That night, for the first time in years, he slept soundly. and in the days that followed he kept his promise. Builders arrived to repair the house, painters brightened its walls, and soon the once broken home stood proud and welcoming. Michael's school fees were paid in full, and a scholarship fund was set aside to ensure his education through college. The boy, who once walked dusty roads with worn-out shoes, now had a chance to dream bigger. And it all began with a single act of kindness: a flat tire on a lonely road, a young boy's helping hand, and a millionaire's rediscovery of what truly mattered. Months passed, and true to his word, Mr. Anderson kept his promise. Builders came to repair the roof and repaint the faded walls of Michael's home. A new fence stood proudly where the broken one had once leaned. The yard that had looked so tired and forgotten now felt alive again, full of hope. Their cupboards were no longer empty, and Michael's mother finally had time to rest without worrying if her children would eat. For the first time in years, laughter returned to that small house. Most importantly, Michael was given the chance to focus on his education. No more nights studying by dim candlelight, no more skipping school to help his mother with extra work. He had the books, the supplies, and the peace of mind he needed. And whenever he doubted himself, he remembered Mr. Anderson's words. Sometimes the best way to honor kindness is to pass it forward. Years rolled by, and Michael grew into a young man. His determination never wavered, and he excelled in his studies. Teachers spoke highly of him, not just for his intelligence but for his character. He never forgot his humble beginnings. Even with new opportunities in front of him, he continued helping classmates who struggled, tutoring children in the neighborhood, and carrying the same humility he had shown the day he helped fix a stranger's tire. The bond between Mr. Anderson and Michael deepened over time. The millionaire often visited the family, no longer as a benefactor but as a friend, almost like a second father. He watched Michael grow, saw him work hard, and felt proud in a way he hadn't felt in years. For Mr. Anderson, the boy had reminded him of who he once was, and in helping Michael, he had found a new purpose in life. Finally, the day came when Michael stood on stage at his graduation ceremony. The hall was filled with proud families, clapping, students and flashing cameras. Michael walked across the stage in his cap and gown, his heart racing but steady with pride. He looked out at the crowd and saw Mr. Anderson sitting in the front row, dressed in his best suit, his eyes shining with pride. Michael took the podium, adjusted the microphone, and began his speech. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. Echoing through the hall, "I stand here today," he said, "because one person believed in me when I had nothing. Years ago, I helped him once with a flat tire on a lonely road, but he helped me with my whole life." The audience fell silent for a moment, letting the words sink in. Then applause erupted, filling the room with thunderous cheers. People stood from their seats, clapping and wiping away tears. Michael's mother held his little sister tightly, tears streaming down her face as she whispered prayers of gratitude. Mr. Anderson sat motionless for a moment, his vision blurred with tears. He had attended countless ceremonies and stood in boardrooms filled with powerful men, but nothing compared to this moment. He was proud not of himself, not of his wealth, but of the young man standing tall on that stage. A boy who had once refused money because he valued kindness more. After the ceremony, Michael walked straight to Mr. Anderson. In the crowd of students and families, he hugged the man tightly. "No longer just a mentor, but truly family. You changed everything for me," Michael said softly. "No," Mr. Anderson replied, his voice breaking. "You changed me. You reminded me of what really matters." From that day forward, Michael carried on the lesson he had once spoken himself. When you see someone who needs help, remember today. And he lived by those words. Wherever he went, he gave back. He volunteered at schools, helped struggling families, and offered guidance to young kids who felt hopeless. He never let success make him forget where he came from, and he made sure to be the same kind of light Mr. Anderson had been for him. Mr. Anderson, too, found new joy in giving. Inspired by Michael, he started a foundation to support underprivileged children, making sure that no child with dreams would be held back by poverty. He often told people, "This all started with a flat tire and a boy who taught me the meaning of wealth." The story of Michael and Mr. Anderson became a quiet legend, in their town whispered with admiration. People saw it as proof that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can ripple outward, touching countless lives, because kindness, like a seed, can grow into something far greater than we ever imagine. And all it takes is one moment, one choice, one hand reaching out to help Dot, and so Michael's life was forever changed by that summer day on a lonely road. But in truth, he wasn't the only one changed. Mr. Anderson, the millionaire who once measured life in dollars and deals, discovered that the greatest investment he had ever made was not in property or business, but in a boy with a heart full of kindness. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness doesn't just change one life, it can change two. And when passed forward, it can change the world.